Happy New Year, everyone. As you may see, it is just me today. Everyone is busy. Cam has got the flu that's been going around. Jamie, once again, is doing a parents' evening. And SJ is just a vagrant. He doesn't love it. He doesn't love ball. And that is sad and sickening. So it is just me today. So I imagine it'll be relatively short, but, I can talk for hours about this. But as it stands, 2025 is upon us, which means the second half of the season is right around the corner, coming to you this Sunday. Starting it out, we've got two really, really, really good games that Sport Tank are live streaming. If you didn't catch the graphic that was posted earlier last week, it is going to be, I'll be doing Cardiff versus Portsmouth. Very excited about that. 1-4 Cardiff, 3-1 Portsmouth. Portsmouth looking good. Cardiff, they need it. They get a bit, bit of desperation time. And also in the southeast, we're going to be doing KCL versus Kent, which I'm very excited about. KCL undefeated. Kent doing well, probably still going to be getting a playoff spot, but be interesting to see if KCL can knock them off again. So we're going to get into it. Obviously, no results for last week because there wasn't any, because there was no games. But previews, all that good stuff. I will also say, coming out starting tomorrow, my mid-season grades. Normally, I do them around Christmas time, release them on Christmas Day and the like. But I went on holiday to America, and if anyone's interested, it was terrible, terrible holiday. Don't go to MetLife. It was awful. Dolphins, not a good football team to watch live. So this week, no national Premiership games, or at least none that I can tell. 4-1 NTU versus Warwick in that rematch. We were obviously there at the start of the season when Warwick beat NTU by single points, 7-6 was the scoreline there. Newcastle versus Leeds. I will talk about the Northern Premiership later, because it seems as though that we've been really, really, really hard on Liverpool, but technically Liverpool still have a chance to stay up in the Prem in that rematch with the Newcastle Raiders. Southern Premiership, Exeter versus Birmingham. I believe that it was an 8-point game last time Exeter took it. So, fairly surprising. But Birmingham coming in once again, just trying to stay out of that relegation zone, but having wins over Cardiff, or the big win over Cardiff, makes it a little bit easier for the Birmingham Lions going forward. Also, I'm looking down, it's because I'm looking at the schedule here instead of watching it tick across and having to wait. Scottish 1, 0-4 Aberdeen, 5-0 Edinburgh Napier. Napier on a roll, let's be honest. And I'll talk about the Scottish as well later on, because again, we're discounting it because Scotland just seems like this faraway land of football that occurs. But, I think come the playoff time, you've got some teams there that are really going to cause some problems, especially when you look at the Midlands. But are we sort of overlook or putting too much credence on, UCLan, Northumbria? Obviously, both very, very good teams. But why are we discounting the entirety of Scotland? Heriot Watt versus Glasgow, both 2-2, very interesting. Northumbria versus LJMU. UCLan, Manchester. Hallam versus Coventry. Hull versus Leicester in the rematch that was a draw last time around. Oxford versus Brunel, Brighton, Reading, Bournemouth, Swansea, 5-0 versus 0-5, UEA versus Essex, KCL versus Kent, as said before, Indy 2, Kiel versus Edge Hill, Holloway versus Solent, Worcester versus Plymouth. And I mean, if you really look at it, Worcester versus Plymouth, that's a pretty decent game and could potentially have promotion implications. Realistically, if Worcester get that win, it's looking pretty decent for the Royals, which at the start of the season, if you would have said that, people be looking at you funny. But, Worcester can do it. In speaking to people who've played against Worcester, I don't mean Gloucestershire here, other teams, Worcester are a much better team than they were last year. So we could be looking at something here, but obviously that loss to Aberystwyth is going to be very, very key. And I still do think that in the Southwest too, it is going to be coming down to that very, very late season fixture. I think potentially, it is. It's the final week of the regular season fixture between between the Thunder and the Blitz. And that's a long old drive for Plymouth. But I think that one very well could have promotion implications, both teams good, but the Southwest two is difficult to say. And also, that's a lot of credence put in on Aberystwyth, considering that they have only played a single game, and that is their victory over the Royals. Southeast two, you've got Greenwich and City, and then the undefeated dominating force of the Kingston Cougars going up against the Canterbury Christchurch Chargers. So from the top, let's go to the National Prem. NTU versus Warwick, obviously very, very close. Very close. A missed field goal away, or sorry, missed extra point away from that game going into the record books as a draw. Realistically, if the Warwick were able to play their late first half season fixture versus Newcastle, we'd be looking at three 4-1 teams coming into 2025 in the Northern Premiership, all with a win over each other, with NTU being Leeds, Warwick being NTU, and Leeds being Warwick. I may have said that twice. But even still, I think obviously this is where it's going to start shaping up. I think that, NTU, Warwick and Leeds, they're all going to be safe next year. But at the end of the day, it is a rivalry that, I mean, sometimes I feel like, especially me, in terms of all of the content that I do, I'm a bit too quick to throw rivalry on something. And I basically say it's a rivalry when maybe the players don't feel that way. I think when it comes to NTU versus Warwick, I don't have to be coy about saying that that's a rivalry game. They've played each other so much over, the last, I think it's 9 years, something mad like that. That is a rivalry game, and I'm sure NTU aren't happy about dropping a game to the Wolves in the Premiership. So personally, I think NTU are going to be walking away with the victory. It's obviously at NTU. Sorry about me moving close to the camera. I'm sure no one wants to see that. But yeah, I think it's going to be another good game, but I think it's going to be going the way of NTU. Obviously, going and playing at Butts Park and then playing, basically anywhere else is a completely different kettle of fish. Um, I would say that, like, are you going to get overwhelmed playing at Butts Park? But then I think that's because I never played at Butts Park, and I would be overwhelmed if I played at Butts Park. I mean, I was overwhelmed when I commentated at Butts Park. So moving on to the second game, so 0-5 Newcastle. Obviously, they're having a much more stressful season than even I thought that they would have. I thought that they'd be able to do something, seeing as how they're the sort of the final holdover from the Northern Prem that all went up to the National. But 0-5, Leeds 4-1. Leeds basically trying to get back on that horse after suffering a loss that I don't think many thought that they would actually suffer in the regular season. But it is what it is. I obviously think Leeds are going to be walking away with it. But sort of moving on in the Northern Premiership, especially on this show with someone like Jamie and SJ's specifically their thoughts on the Raptors getting called up after being in the Div 1 last year and not having a fantastic go of it. I think it was 3-5. Let me check again. Not a fantastic record, but I was very much more positive about 3-5. I was a lot more positive about the Raptors than they were, but it's not out of the realm of possibility that the Raptors can stay up. Realistically, all they need to do is to beat Newcastle by 9 in their rematch, which is going to be coming on the 2nd of Feb. So it's going to be one to watch, but I imagine Newcastle will be going into that with a loss under their belt. Liverpool will not be playing a game until that point, and it is going to be at Liverpool. So, home field advantage. And to be fair, Newcastle have got a pretty hard run of it before they even get to Liverpool, as they've got to go through Leeds and NTU first before Liverpool. So, it's not unlikely that we see a Liverpool in the Prem next year. It could happen. Basically, it's not. It's going to sound harsh. It's not like LJMU where it's not really looking it's really not looking good. Like, it's not looking good for Liverpool, but LJMU is not looking good for them at all. Southern Premiership, Exeter versus Birmingham. Um, Again, 8-0, I believe, was the fixture, or was the result that came off the last time. I think that may have been the explosion that wasn't explosion. I don't really know what Birmingham want me to say about that, but I know that they, or was it Winter Wonderline? I don't remember which event it was. No, it wasn't Winter Wonderline. I forget. Hmm. But 8-0 was the score in that game again. It looks like both these teams are going to be staying up, but realistically, looking at the Southern Prem, especially at the bottom, where it's a bit more interesting. Obviously, we've got SGS versus Portsmouth coming up, but it's a bit more interesting at the bottom. Cardiff need Exeter to beat Birmingham. Is that right? No, I've forgotten what it is. It's in my mid-season grades post that will be coming up this week. I've done the maths on it, but Cardiff need some level of help from one of these teams, and I'm fairly certain that it is Birmingham. They need some help from Birmingham because they've not played the reverse fixture against the Demons yet. So again, not out their own possibility for Cardiff, but Birmingham 1-4, Exeter 2-2 should be a good game. Again, it's one of those ones where if I could be in more than two places at once, that'd be another game that I'd go and live stream. Cardiff versus Portsmouth. Portsmouth again, they're on a roll. I really do think when it comes to the playoffs, I think Portsmouth have got a very, very good chance of being in the final, and it being an all Southern final. I know that does discount, Lente, Leeds, and Warwick, and then whoever the fourth team is. But I don't know. I just think that Portsmouth are looking pretty good, but I'm very much looking forward to being able to go and view Portsmouth with my own eyes this weekend. Let me see. Let me see what it is. Let me see what I've got. So the Cobras' journey this season relies heavily on the Exeter Demons, as the Cobras would need Exeter to beat Brum and then lose to Cardiff. There we go. There we go. That's what it is. I'm sure there's some point differentials in there as well that would make it easier. So we will be there 1 p.m. I will be in Cardiff once again at, I think Dylan's told me how to pronounce it. Clanromney, I believe is how you pronounce it. But I'm not from Wales. So hate on that as much as you like, but I am trying. In the Scottish one, Aberdeen versus Edinburgh Napier. Aberdeen. It's a shame that they had a good season a couple of years ago, but it's the jump up to the level that they are now. Obviously, being in Scotland, just happy that they're a team and still going on, unlike UWS. But Napier breaking out, it's been due for a fair few years. 5-0, still got some big games to play, but realistically, that game looking like to me it's going to be Napier all the way through. Heriot Watt versus Glasgow for me once again is another one of those games where I wish that I could be in multiple places at once, because that's an absolute corker. Heriot Watt 2-2, Glasgow 2-2. It's considering what happened last year with Heriot Watt having to fork over those walkovers. It really does beg the question how far could the Wolverines could have gone last year if they didn't have to hand over those walkovers. But it is a shame. Heriot Watt, I believe they have got a walkover victory over Aberdeen, but I don't know if that's true. They gave someone. So 14-8 over Aberdeen, beating the Mavericks 27-15. Their first fixture between these two, Glasgow beat them 19-14, and then Heriot Watt obviously having a big shootout, 33-49 loss to the Napier Knights. Again, close game, 5 games in it, 5 points in it when they played in week 5. It's going to be a very, very close one. That is going to be one of those games that is too tough to call, but I will certainly try. I'm just surprised. The Scottish one really is a absolute beautiful division, and if it wasn't so damn far away, I imagine that the majority of my live streams would be made up of those very, very tense games that they have got up in Scotland. Um, with what the Mavericks, who aren't doing too well. Obviously, Harriet Watt and Glasgow above them, Sterling as well. Like you've got three teams on a 2-2 record: Glasgow, Harriet Watt, and Sterling. Edinburgh currently at 2-3, Napier at 5-0, Aberdeen at 0-4. I cannot wait for the playoffs. I cannot wait for the playoffs just to see what it looks like. And realistically, I do think that these Scottish teams are going to have a much better go around of things than they had last year. So moving on to the Northern one, 4-1 Northumbria, 0-5 LJMU. It's not looking great for the Fury. It seems so strange to say. They were definitely a team on the come up a few years ago, but they just haven't managed to translate that very much, or at all, if we're completely honest. And they've got a very, very hard run of it with 2 games against the Mustangs and then 1 against UClan. It's if they want to stay up, it's going to be a fairly big task. And I don't know. I don't know if they've got the. I don't know if they can. Obviously, as mentioned on the UClan versus Northumbria live stream in December, obviously Aaron O'Coin, which is obviously not a one-man team, was in a walking boot. Um, is that going to be a factor that is going to be playing out for Northumbria? But can LJMU do obviously 2 fixtures against the divisional leaders in the Mustangs, and then 1 against UClan? Not ideal if you're the Fury. It's going to be interesting to see, but I think it sounds bad, and I know that I'm very, very prone to um, too early picks, but I think the Fury's goose may be cooked. UClan versus Manchester Metropolitan Eagles, obviously. Um, I've got a feeling in my bones that I think Manchester Metropolitan's going to take a win off of someone. They're going to take a win off of someone, and we're all going to be stood there with our mouths agape. And I don't know. I've just got a feeling. I think it's just a surprising one. I think they've been on the come up recently. They've got UClan, they've got Northumbria. It wouldn't surprise me, especially in their second meeting with the Tyrants, if MMU do take that victory off the Tyrants, get it back. But I don't know. I really do have a feeling that MMU are going to be able to dethrone one of the big boys, or at least keep it close with UClan and Northumbria the second time around. Obviously, 42-0 against UClan the first time, 38-6 against the Mustangs the first time, keeping it within 10 of the Tyrants, 34-24. I don't know. I've just got a feeling. I've just got a feeling that they're sort of like Greenwich. They can just upset the balance like that. Um, in the Midlands and Yorkshire one, in a game that, looking at the start of the season, would you really say it was interesting? Hallam versus Coventry. Coventry 2-3. Sheffield Hallam 2-2. These two have not met this season yet, but it's difficult to really gauge Sheffield Hallam after their loss to Leicester, because if you're trying to do the maths in your head, as I tend to do, Leicester drawing with Hull does not paint a particularly fantastic picture of the Longhorns, and then Hallam, I think, was 12-0 shutout against Leicester. What does that say about Hallam? I think Coventry are on the rise, or at least it seems that way, being able to get a win off of Hull and off of Leicester. But I think it's going to be a really, really interesting game. I'm happy that we're doing the reverse fixture in Coventry, or at least, well, I'm doing that one, so I get to watch it. Yeah, I think it's going to be a great game. It's again, will do my picks. It's a little bit less exciting when it's just me, but it is what it is. I don't know. My heart is leaning towards the Jets. Hull versus Leicester. It's 0-4, 0-4-1 for Hull. Leicester 2-2-1. Hull know that they need to pull something out of the bag if they want to stay in D1, which I think is what makes it interesting. Obviously, coming down to a tie, I think it was 14-14, or it might have been 2020 between those two earlier in the season, which did come as a bit of a surprise as we thought it'd be Hull basically just on a descent, right? So that's why I think the rematch is somewhat interesting because it's a winnable game for both sides. 2020, if it goes to 2020, that's a winnable game for both sides. Um, it's going to be an interesting one. Hungry dog runs fast is what you should really think about, and Hull are practically starving right now. Um, but it's going to be a very very interesting. Again, it's not that I don't want to see anyone get relegated because you have to have relegation, but it's just like Hull and Coventry. They've been up so long and stayed up despite being in relegation zones. Um, that it would just be it's gonna be weird to see them go down. But as it stands right now, it's looking like it's Hull. Southern one, we got a big rematch. At Brunel at Oxford. Brunel 5-0, Oxford 1-2. Brunel's form wavering slightly as the season progressed in the first half of the season, having some short fixtures, beating Brighton 11-8, and then beating Reading 8-0 after putting on a massive show. I think it was 52-0 against Reading the first time round. Obviously, only playing Brighton once. It's going to be interesting to see. Brunel do have a tendency to burn out. I know SJ's not here, so I say that. Brunel do have a tendency to flame out and put themselves into hot water come the end of the season. Are we going to be seeing that again from the Burners? I don't know, but Oxford are going to have a chip on their shoulder, especially like one and two losing to Hearts and Brunel. They did it last year in the regular season and still were one game away from promotion. So you can't count the Lancers out, but Brunel really need to put their foot down and say, "Whoa, we need to stop this narrative of us flaming out." So moving on, a game that is probably going to be deciding who is relegated in the Southern one, unless Brighton can get a win off of someone. Reading versus Brighton. Brighton beating Reading the first time by 4, so Reading will need to beat them by 5 if they want to eclipse them in terms of the um, rankings, but not technically because Brighton had moved to 1 and 4 and Reading had moved to 0 and 5. So Brighton would have to lose out. Reading has to beat Brighton by 5. Personally, I know Reading have got a big squad. Do not get me wrong, but I can't see how. I think Brighton are a team on the come up, and it is a shame to watch. To say that the Reading Knights are getting relegated because I do like the Reading Knights. I think they're a good team, but I don't know. I think Brighton, despite being 1 and 3, I think in my grades post that will come out later this week, I think my opening line for Brighton is I think they're the most impressive 1 and 3 team in the league. So for me, I think it's going to be Brighton all the way. And obviously, we could be doing Brighton versus Brunel on Super Bowl Sunday, which will be good. I'm happy to do that one. Well, Brighton at Brunel. Moving on to the Southwestern one. It's a bit of a mess, isn't it? It's a bit of a mess. Bournemouth 5-0, Swansea 0-5. Not much to really talk about for that one. Unless the Swansea Titans can catch Bournemouth being rusty coming off of Christmas, I can't see it happening. 5 games played for the Titans, 2 points scored. I don't know. Not a game you can really get excited about. I don't think. I am very much surprised that Swansea are in this position. I thought Swansea were going to be much better coming into this season and their promotion. I really, really did, but it's not looking good for them. They're gonna need some. They're gonna need Bath to mess up basically if they want to stay up. But I don't know. I just can't see it from Swansea. So Southeastern, UEA versus Essex. Essex, another one where it's seeming though it's looking a bit like they'll be going down. UEA 2 and 3. I think they'll be obviously 3 and 3, but I think it's going to be interesting to see where the playoff standings lie, especially because of that walkover from UCL. Because UCL doing better than I thought anyway. But a walkover is going to be clouding their playoff dreams very, very heavily. KCL versus Kent. Again, I love this game. I'm happy that it's being streamed. I wish that I was doing it, but again, I can't be in more than one place at once, which is a shame. That's what we need. Sportech needs to invest in a cloning machine so I can just watch all the games, or all the games live streamed, and I'm just Scott Hansen in it, and going for a not going to the toilet for 8 hours or whatever it is. What a guy! KCL obviously coming out, putting on a great run, 4-0, shutting out UCL 27-0. Obviously, that's what shutout means. 21-8 against Kent the first time, 28-8 against the Pirates, getting a walkover from the Blades. You know, they've got 4 games on the bounce, but I mean, I think if KCL can win these 4 games on the bounce, then they're undisputed an elite team. They're good, but they can win these 4 games on the bounce. You know, sign me up for KCL doing something pretty major in the playoffs and potentially spoiling all of the preseason predictions of what the Southern Div 1 playoffs would look like. Pardon me. They've got Kent, Essex, UCL, and UEA all in a row, which is pretty hard going. But I think that return fixture against the Emperors could be an interesting one. But obviously, ending the season out with UEA is also going to be very, very difficult for them. But again, it's great to see. But Kent, on the other hand, 3-2. Again, they're up in the southeastern top bracket, which isn't a surprise. But being given a loss 18-6 against UCL, I think that's the biggest surprise of their season so far. But being able to dispatch their foes again, I'm saying that they're foes. In the UEA Pirates, 14-8 and then 19-0. You know, they've got a much easier go of things come the second half of the season. Obviously, having that big game with Kent, a week off, rare week off, then Essex, then UCL. I imagine that UCL game is going to be pretty tasty as well. I'm sure that Kent are quite unhappy that they managed to lose that one. So moving on to the Division 2, Div 2, Kiel versus Edge Hill. Obviously, the Northwestern twos are. It's we'll say a mess. It's interesting to watch because you've got Staffordshire at 2-2, Edge Hill at 2-1, and Lancaster at 2-1. Kiel, I think, are potentially in a spot where if teams overlook the Crusaders in Edge Hill and Lancaster, and they have the potential to really spoil someone's entire season. You know, it's Kiel one of those teams where you're happy that they're still there because teams drop out and it's never good. You know, I remember playing against Kiel, and when we had Chester Legion in the league, I know that they're still knocking about, and Huddersfield Hawks. I don't think Huddersfield Hawks are still knocking about, if I'm completely honest. But Kiel have got, they've got everyone again, right? But they could, if teams start overlooking Kiel, I think that's going to could cause some problems. But Edge Hill 2-1. I think it's Edge Hill beat Lancaster. Lancaster beat Staffordshire, and Staffordshire beat Edge Hill. I think that's how the cycliarity. No, it's Edge Hill beat Staffordshire, but Staffordshire beat Edge Hill, and Edge Hill beat Lancaster. Basically, the big one there is going to be Lancaster and Edge Hill's rematch. Edge Hill beating Lancaster 10-0 at the start of the season, making me go, "Oh my god, what?" Because of my, preposterous proclamation about the Bombers. But it's still very much within their grasp, much as it's very much within the grasp of the Vikings as well. Could be interesting to see who goes up from that, but obviously we've got to look at the Northern D2 playoffs as well, because there's one big name and I think it's going to be causing problems. Obviously, the Northeastern being led by the Sabres. I still think York are going to make the playoffs, but the problem is with that is how can you really say that when they've played one game and they lost? I don't know. I still think they will. I still think York are a decent side, and despite Sunderland being well 2-1 at this right now, I still think York are going to be causing problems come the second half of the season. They haven't got North East hasn't got a game this week. Southern 2, a battle of two teams that have yet to get a win. Solent versus Royal Holloway. It's going to be a scrappy game, I tell you that. It's going to be a very, very scrappy game. Both these teams are going to be hunting for their first win of the season. But again, it's very, very strange. I wouldn't have said that Holloway would be in this position, but you have got to have some time to rebuild. But you can't turn around and say that the Royal Holloway Bears were a bad side when they were in D1 by any means. Like last year, managed getting a draw off of Oxford. Oxford obviously making the Premiership South Finals. That's the D1 South Finals. That's an accomplishment in itself. But two shutouts on the record books for the Bears against Brooks, 35-0, Surrey, 22-0, and then 24-8 against the Sussex Saxons. That's a hard 3-game stretch all in a row. Brooks, Surrey, and Sussex. That's hard. They didn't they didn't set the Bears up for success there. But they've obviously got Solent and they've got Chichester in the second half of the season. But I don't know. It seems that Solent are really flying under the radar for me. I don't really know what Solent have been up to, apart from the fact they're 0-2. 43-6 against Solent, 41-7 against Sussex. Not ideal for Solent. Not ideal. They've constantly been a team that have been on the precipice. Seems they've taken a step back this year, but again, they're not a team that I would, I don't worry about the future of the Solent Redhawks. I really, really don't. No, they're a good squad. They're a good squad, but sometimes it just happens. Sometimes it be like that. So in the Southwestern, Worcester versus Plymouth. Realistically, I think this game is a lot more important than we may give it credit for. Worcester 2-1 beating Gloucestershire. And who else have the Worcester Royals beaten? I imagine it's going to start with the words Bath Spa. Take that what you will, Bath Spa. Not dealing with any teams that play on an angled field. I'm just not having it. Oh, I'll talk about that later. In the Northern Playoffs. Let me look at my. I imagine they did beat Bath Spa. They obviously beat Gloucestershire. And then lost to Aberystwyth 14-3, but I imagine they did beat they beat Bath Spa 22-0. 2-1 for Worcester. It is impressive, given the last few seasons that they've had. And this game very much could cause some problems for the Blitz. The Blitz have had a huge layoff. Even if you take out the Christmas break, their layoff has been huge. Whilst Worcester's last game on the 8th, it could cause problems. It is going to be out Worcester as well. Plymouth 2-0, beating the Bullets in a very, very stressful game. I believe it came down to a single point. I want to say either 19-20 or 18-19. I want to say the final score in that game was 16-19, and then also beating Bath Spa as well. Again, because the Southwest, because not a lot of games have been played because of the weather, it's difficult to really say. But Worcester potentially could be moving up into that top spot, which seemed, unthinkable even last season. Season before that, but they obviously came down from D1. But it's looking good for them. But they would realistically they obviously need to beat Plymouth, and then they need Plymouth to beat Aberystwyth. in the last week of the season. And then obviously Bushra would have to beat the Bullets too as well. So could be a bit of a mess inside the southwest. I think Bath Spa and Gloucestershire, they're very much out of the running for promotion, but Worcester, Plymouth, and Aberystwyth. Again, I think when it comes to the Southern Div 2 playoffs, it's going to be interesting to see just what they do, because there's not really been much action. Aberystwyth only playing once. There's not really been much action. We can't really say anything. Paint a better picture from the southwest going forward. Southeast, Greenwich versus City. Greenwich could be on track for a playoff spot. I believe they've got another meeting with the surging Kingston Cougars at some point, fairly late in the season. But for me, I think Kingston are going to have that div. QMBL are obviously very, very loud in terms of their hunt for a playoff spot. And they're 3-1, so they might as well be. Let's say I think they've got. Yeah, they have got Kingston again on the second, and they've got City again. Actually, is that correct? Have I pulled that out? Oh no, I'm on the wrong page. But yeah, Greenwich could do it again. I think Greenwich are one of those teams that can. Greenwich for me are the staple team that can just pull a win out of nowhere and really, really depress people. They're 2-1. Who do they draw against? Have I got that wrong? 12-12 against City. Oh. I haven't got that. Is that game happening this week? Oh well. If I've got it wrong, good game. Good game. Good game. Good gamey game. I'm just want to see if anyone's commented saying that game is happening or not. They haven't. If it is, whatever. Greenwich are a team to watch out for. Simple as that. Kingston versus Canterbury, 3-0 versus 0-4. Not much to really talk about. Obviously, the link with Canterbury and the Eastgate Mavericks will take some more shape going forward. But Kingston looking good. Yeah, I mean, in terms of, I did sort of skip over it in terms of the Northern Div 2 playoffs. I think that's going to be very, very interesting. Sheffield and Edge Hill currently lead, I think. The Northwestern and Northeastern. But for me, it's far and away the Derby Braves' chance to go back to the finals and then take the championship this time. I really do think that it's Derby's year. They've been right on the edge of promotion for the last few years, and now it's time. I think it's time. But realistically, Sheffield and York could do something, but I'm a bit less certain about how the Northwestern will do against someone like Derby. So moving on to picks, because again, I've got no one to talk to. Moving on, and I've all of my sort of talking and my nonsense effluvia that spills forth from my brain about Uniball are in those grades posts that are coming out this week. So it's just a lot of me going, oh, this team's actually half decent. But yeah, so I'm just going to do picks by myself. I might talk through them. Who knows? So NTU versus Warwick, I've got NTU. NTU, obviously that game only ending with a single point, being played at NTU's ground as well. It's not too much of a travel, but NTU do love to stress their home field advantage. I think NTU are very, very unhappy to have lost that game to Warwick, and especially with the momentum of beating Leeds. For me, it's NTU all the way. Newcastle versus the Griffins. Most of the Griffins. Not really much to say about that. Exeter versus Brum. Gosh, that's a close game. I'm going to give it to the Demons again. 0-8 8-0 the first time round for the Demons. It's being played at Exeter as well. For me, that's just enough. Exeter seem to be on a bit of a roll, beating Cardiff in a very, very good game prior to the Christmas break, I'm going to be going for the Demons. I'm not picking Cardiff versus Portsmouth because I don't pick games that I do. Aberdeen versus Napier. It's simple for me. It's Napier. They're on a roll. I really think they're going to cause some problems. I think the whole of Scotland's going to cause some problems come the playoffs, if I'm completely honest. Heriot Watt versus Glasgow. Oh dear. For me, I'm going to... Just because I think about it sometimes. I'll lay awake at night and I think about what Heriot Watt could have done last year if they didn't have to take so many walkovers. With that, I'm going to be picking Heriot Watt. It's going to be a very, very close game. 5 points in it last time. I've just got a feeling. I've got a feeling, which is never good if you're Heriot Watt, and I'm just saying I've got a feeling. Northumbria Mustangs versus LJMU. Mustangs all the way. I think it may potentially be closer than people expect it to be, but for me, I don't think the Fury are going to be able to have the firepower to take on the Mustangs. Do X to have 3 home games on the bounce, Coach Russ? Let me check for you. Let me check for you. I hate having dead air. They do, Coach Russ. Yeah, they do. They've got Birmingham, then Portsmouth, then Cardiff, and then they are away at SGS. That's a horrible... I'm so happy you pointed that out, Coach Russ. That's a horrible 4 weeks of football. That's a horrible, horrible 4 weeks of football. Ugh. That makes me feel bad that I'm not doing any extra games this side of the year. That's bad. That's poor effort from me, I think. Damn, that's poor effort from me. Well, I can't do anything about it now. That's a horrible 4 weeks. Birmingham, Portsmouth, Cardiff, SGS. Ugh, that is gross. That's disgusting. Yeah, I don't know where I was. You clan man met. I'm not willing to stamp this man met shock win on this particular one, just because UClan know that they need to stay in it. Obviously, beating Northumbria by 3. No, not beating Northumbria by what they needed to in order to take the top of the division. If I was UClan, I'd be quite annoyed about that. You know, they've got to stay in it. You know, they can still get home field advantage, but it's going to be a tough old road. And despite Man Met's sort of surging confidence, or at least I've got surging confidence in Man Met, I don't think it's going to be going the way of the Eagles. Hallam versus Coventry. I think I may be delusional. Ladies and gentlemen. I'm picking the Jets. I think that the Jets have got something here. They've managed to keep it close with Nottingham Green twice, which is very, very impressive considering the run that the Green have been on. Beating Leicester, who beat Hallam, and also beating beating Leicester, beating Hull, beating everyone. No, that's not true. Yeah, I don't know. I'm going with the Jets. Hull Sharks versus Leicester Longhorns. I'm half tempted to pick the Sharks because I think the Sharks know what they're sort of in for right now. Yeah, you know what? I'm going to pick Hull. I think it's a hungry dog runs fast situation. If Hull want any chance of staying in D1, they're gonna need to take this win off of the Longhorns. They're gonna need it, big style, right? Yeah, I'm taking the Sharks here. Southern One Lancers versus Burners, big game. He's not here. SJ's not here. I think the Lancers have this. I think the Lancers, they're going to be able to refuel over this Christmas break, come back with a much bigger sense of swagger and come into Brunel, who for some reason feel like their confidence, or at least that's the vibe I get, is that the confidence in Brunel's gone, but they're 5-0, which doesn't make any sense to me. So for me, I'm taking the Lancers. Can't wait to hear about that tomorrow. Brighton versus Reading. Um, Brighton. Brighton 100%. Sorry to see that to you, Reading, but I think Brighton are on the come up again. I think they're the best 1-3 team in the league. Um, yeah, I think, and I don't think it. And this is going to sound harsh to Reading. I don't think it's going to be as close as last time. I don't think it's going to be as close as last time. I think Brighton are going to really, really stamp their foot down in that game. Bournemouth versus Swansea. Bournemouth. Don't really need to waste my time with an explanation of that one. UEA versus Essex. UEA. KCL versus Kent. I see no reason not to just completely hitch the wagon to the Regents. Um, Despite me, very much at the start of the season, hitching the wagon to the Kent Falcons. If KCL will allow me, I will simply just go nope and swap it over to KCL. I'm sure that they probably won't mind. But yeah, I see no reason not to just give KCL everything, right? In the I keep saying in the D2. In D2, Kiel versus Edge Hill. No reason to not pick Edge Hill, but again, these teams in the Northwestern, I think I know that the record for Kiel hasn't been fantastic, but if you're too busy looking at promotion and things like that, and you look past Kiel, I think there is a chance that Kiel just go, well, okay, well, don't don't overlook us, or we'll ruin your season. But Edge Hill know the position they're in. They're only a few games away from being promoted, which again seems mad. And they didn't like it when I said that Edge Hill don't seem like a D1 side, but it's one of those things where like there's just some teams that like always struggle at the last step to get to promotion, and I would argue that Lancaster give off more D1 energy than Edge Hill, which is why it would be fantastic to see Edge Hill do it. So Edge Hill for that one. Um, Royal Holloway versus Solent. Bit of a pick'em game here, to be honest. Royal Holloway. You can't count out the success that they have had in the last few seasons, even though they got relegated. I still look back at that draw with Oxford, and I was impressed. Holloway. Royals versus Blitz. Royals versus Blitz. I might come back to that one. Greenwich versus City. Greenwich. Kingston versus Canterbury. Kingston. Royals versus Blitz. That's a tough one. Give me the Royals. Give me the Royals. Plymouth have had. I know that we're coming off Christmas break and whatever, but Plymouth have just been sat there for so long. Not their fault, of course, but I don't know. I don't know. Once again, bad news if you're a Worcester Royals player, but I've got a feeling. Worcester Royals over the Plymouth Blitz will be close. 21-17 Royals over the Blitz. That's it. Based on nothing. Based on absolutely nothing. Ladies and gentlemen, this has been the first rundown of 2025. We will be back with you next week where hopefully it won't just be me. I can't believe I've just been talking to myself for 50 minutes about Uniball. Well, you know what's weird? I do it anyway. I just talk to myself about this sport all day long. And that's all I do, all I think about. I'm locked in a Uniball cage. Yeah, this is the first rundown of 2025. Good luck to all of the teams playing this week. Stay safe all of that good stuff. And join us on Sunday for a pair of absolute corkers as I'll be heading to Clanrumney to watch, well, not watch, obviously, to stream the Cardiff Cobras taking on the Portsmouth Destroyers. And then we also have KCL versus the Kent Falcons in at the Southeast one, which is a corker, absolute corker. Join me and hopefully some other people here next week at 7:30. We're just going to make that the baseline. I think 7:30 for week 11's rundown. Picks will be out because I've only got my picks now because I know them. But yeah, thank you for joining me. Welcome to my Tebb talk. I thought that was a funny title. Um, that's it. Thank you very much for being here, and we will see you next week. Goodbye. No, no.